Yeah. Okay. Okay. I think we're going to start, and the people outside the room are going to miss the wonderful keynote. So I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Magnus Sahlgren. Magnus is the head of research for natural language understanding at AI, or Artificial Intelligence Sweden. Magnus has a PhD in computational linguistics, and his research lies at the intersection between computational linguistics, philosophy, and artificial intelligence. He's primarily known for his work on computational models of meaning, and he's currently driving the initiative to train large language models for the Nordic languages. Magnus has previously held positions at the Research Institutes of Sweden, the Swedish Defence Research Agency, the Swedish Institute of Computer Science, Stockholm University, and he's the co-founder of the language technology company Gavagai. Yeah. Okay, so I'd like you to welcome Magnus. He will be with us and speak to you for about 25 minutes. We'll have some time to ask a few questions, right? And then he has to dash off. But so Magnus, thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here, and I'm going to talk about the things that I love to do, which is building large language models. And I'm guessing that this is not directly what you work on, but it's sort of relevant because we need to use data for it. And I guess that most of you by now have heard about ChatGPT. Who has? Great. Who has tried it? Yeah, fair amount of people. That's great. So then at least you know sort of what we're talking about. So what I'll be talking about is a little bit of the background for the sort of the development of large language models, when it happened, why it happened, and why we care about that. And then I will be talking about how we build large language models for the Nordic region. So here in Sweden. Let's see now, something popped up here. I'm going to click OK to that, I guess. Oh, what happened? How do I actually, okay, so I'll try this one. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so large language models. So I guess for those of you who have tried ChatGPT, you know that a language model is something that just operates on language. What we actually do is we train a statistical model to learn a probability distribution over language. And a language model learns this probability distribution by simply reading text. So in the case of a GPT model, or ChatGPT and GPT-4 and GPT-3, we use a simple next token prediction objective to train these models. So it's just simply trying to predict the next token in the input data all the time. There is another type of language model, which is an encoder type of model. You might have heard of BERT, which is one of those encoders. In that case, we instead blank out a few of the input tokens and then try to predict the masked tokens in the input sequence. And these give rise to slightly different language models, but they all learn probability distributions. And I mean, this is not something new in the field of language processing. These type of models have been around forever. But what is new is that we now use a very powerful compute mechanism to learn this, which is the transformer architecture. So that's simply just a deep neural network of a specific type, which was published in 2017. And I would say all current language models are based on the transformer architecture. And so the reason why we want to build these language models is because we can utilize then this underlying probability distribution of a language to solve a wide range of different language processing tasks, maybe even all language processing tasks that we encounter. I guess the jury is still a little bit out if there are things that are impossible for language models, but as soon as someone claims that something is impossible, just wait a week and someone has solved it using a language model. So the pace of development right now is just incredible, and I'll come back to that. But so if you're like me, and also Monica Lassi previously was in the field of language processing, this was really a disruptive event in our field. So we can basically talk about the before and after 2018. So the transformer architecture was introduced in late 2017. And in 2018, people started to build language models based on transformers. And that changed the entire field of NLP basically overnight. So before we had transformers, we built specific processing pipelines for each language processing task that we wanted to solve. So if you want to do like recognize names in text before 2018, you built a processing pipeline for that specific purpose. And then if you want to do text categorization, you started from scratch and built another processing pipeline for that. But once we started to have pre-trained language models, you would base all of your pipelines on these pre-trained language models. So for example, if you wanted to do named entity recognition on English data, you take a pre-trained BERT model, Google, for example, and then you base your entire thing based on that. And then if you do text categorization, you take the same pre-trained language model and utilize that. And the reason why we do that is because we can then leverage this underlying probability distribution to enhance the performance. So things become better, and we also need less training data for actually doing supervised training. So we get transfer learning effects. So this is really a transformative moment. We go to encoder type language models and start building processing pipelines using pre-trained models. We were quite early here in Sweden to do uptake on this technology. So we started with a project called Language Models for Swedish Authorities back in 2019, because our hypothesis was that in Sweden, it would be the public sector who would be the fastest uptakers of this, because they have to work on Swedish text data. So most of our industries also have business outside of Sweden, so they would not focus that much on Swedish text data, but the public sector has to do that. So we started this project, which was funded by the Swedish Innovation Agency, and the idea was to try to push out language models into the public sector. And this has been quite successful. So most, if not all, of the current Swedish language models has some connection to this project. We were able to build solutions based on language models for all of the government agencies that were part of the project, and it has spread throughout the public sector in Sweden. So quite successful. But of course, we also saw some challenges working with language models. And one of those challenges is maybe related to your interests, which is data readiness. So when you work with stakeholders that want to apply language technology, you often find that data is the main bottleneck. So even having just access to the data can be a bottleneck. And so we now use the term data readiness to talk about, is your data really in a state where you can start to apply AI or not? Or maybe you just have to spend another half year or something just to do data formatting and processing. And so we started a spin-off project based on this called the Data Readiness Lab, which is still ongoing for this year. And we also realized that we had no way to evaluate language models in Swedish. So we had no evaluation benchmarks, which is of course a problem when you start to build different models. How do you actually quantify their performance? So we started another spin-off project called SuperLim, which develops the first Swedish benchmark for language models. And that's now finalized, and we will present the benchmark next week actually at the Swedish NLP seminar. So now we can actually quantify the performance of language models, and we start to work on data readiness amongst our stakeholders. So that's great, but something happened during the course of this project. So in the summer of 2020, GPT-3 was published. So that was also a transformative event, because now we had a language model that was not an encoder, but it was a generative language model. It was built specifically just to generate text. And it was also on a scale that we hadn't seen before. So we call that nowadays an LLM, so a large language model. And this also was a disruptive event. It sort of transformed the field. And this is the sort of development that we are seeing right now. People are going from using encoders to using decoders, essentially using generative models instead, and also scaling up the size of these models. And the reason why we do that is because when you scale up the model size, they become a general capacity model. So you can apply them to basically any type of task that you want to use it for. And you also don't have to fine-tune the model. you can just directly apply it. And that sounds a little bit magical, but that's the way that it works. So you can skip the supervised step completely and just use the pre-trained language models to solve tasks. I might come into how we do that soon. But so this is the development that we're currently seeing. So this is the size of the models here. And GPT-3, which was published then in 2020 at the summer, that was the biggest model that we have seen so far, 175 billion parameters. You know what a parameter is, right? So it's a weight that you can train in the model. So you have 175 billion trainable weights in these models. That's a lot of weights. But we've seen just a continuous scale race in this field, starting from GPT-3. So the biggest models that we know of right now is the Pathways language model from Google, which has 540 billion parameters, and also the Megatron model from NVIDIA, which is 530 billion parameters. It's also interesting to note that all of the big models that are available, they're not open source, of course, they're proprietary. So Google does not give access to the model weights, for example, and the GPT models from OpenAI is only available from API, of course. The only model that is actually open source is the Bloom model, which is on the same size as GPT-3, but is trained to specifically represent a wide variety of languages. So Indic languages, African languages, and European languages, which is interesting, and it's a completely open model. But this is not the only thing that is sort of growing. It's also the size of the training data that we use. So GPT-3 was trained on 300 billion tokens of data, which is a lot. But we've also seen an increase in the size of training data lately. So there was a model called Chinchilla from DeepMind, which was published last year. They use 1.4 trillion tokens in the training data, which is enormous amounts of data. So you have sort of two sort of competing directions when it comes to scaling up these models. One is simply just adding parameters to the models, adding depth and maybe length to the models. And the other trend is to just add training data. So if you're a smaller actor like us at RDA Sweden, and we want to build a large-scale model for the Nordic region, so how do we do that? Do we just simply add data, or do we scale up the model size? And we have opted to scale up the model size, and I will explain why. But first, just a little bit cheesy image that I stole from the Google blog. But I think it's sort of illustrative. It shows why we would like to scale up these models. So first of all, they can become better at solving tasks when you add parameters, but they also become more general. So you can use the same model to solve several different types of tasks. And you can also use a model to do things that are non-trivial, like common sense reasoning, for example. Okay, so that's a little bit of background on large language models. So we have seen this development, and we sort of realized that this is probably something we need to be on top of and start doing in the Nordic region, and particularly here in Sweden. So we have started this initiative, which we call GPT-SWE, which is an idea to build a foundational language model for Swedish primarily, but in extension for all the Nordic languages, or the North Germanic languages. And this is, of course, not something that we can do by ourselves. In my team, we're around 10 people. We have deep competence in language models and in computational linguistics, but we have never trained a large language model before. And training a model on this size borders to HPC, high performance computing. So if you compare our team size to the team sizes who build ChatGPT, for example, it's orders of magnitude less people that we have access to. So the way that we try to approach this is to build strategic partnerships and just collaborate with other organizations that think that this might be a cool idea to be part of. So we work together with several different organizations here, RISE, which is the Research Institutes of Sweden. We work with NVIDIA because we train on NVIDIA hardware and we use NVIDIA software. And we would like our training runs to be as effective and efficient as possible. And so we get support to do that. And I might say a few words more about that soon. We also get great support from the National Supercomputer Center in Linköping, where the actual hardware that we use is located. And then we collaborate with the Wallenberg Autonomous Systems and Software Program, WASP, which is a very large initiative here in Sweden to promote AI research. And that also gives us access to infrastructure. We also try to sort of promote collaboration and just knowledge sharing. So we have started a Discord server, which we call AI Nordics, where we try to collect people in the Nordic region who are interested in AI. And if you are interested in AI, you're free to just use that link and just join the community. But so the main challenge for us, if you think about these different ways to scale models, is to how do we find enough data in Swedish to actually train a large scale model? So we know that we at the very least need around 300 billion tokens of high quality Swedish data. How do we find that? Is there even those amounts of Swedish text available somewhere? And you would maybe think now that, so we have a national library here in Sweden that have stored data since forever. Maybe we can use data from them, but it turns out it's not possible. That data cannot leave the library, so it cannot be used for things like this. And I will just mention that this is really annoying and we should solve this issue. Yeah. So how do we do this? How do we find enough data in Swedish? So what we did is we took advantage of the fact that Swedish might be a small language, but we have close friends typologically. We're situated in the Nordic region and we're surrounded by neighbors with almost the same language. In the North Germanic language family, the differences between languages are very small. So we actually collect data from all of these North Germanic languages. So it's Swedish, Norwegian, Danish, Icelandic. You could include Faroese here also, but we couldn't find any data in Faroese. But if you have that, we'd be happy to include it. So we spent almost half a year, the entire team more or less, just collecting data. And we took whatever we found on the internet, open sources, things that have already been collected and published, like Common Crawl and various derivatives of Common Crawl, like MC4 and Oscar. There are several of these data sets. We also did a fair amount of scraping. So we took some large discussion forums here in Sweden. We scraped some government websites and things like that, because we see that public sector will likely be one of the stakeholders for this. So just looking at the data compilation, and I don't expect you to read all of this, but you can see basically, I mean, you get a rough idea of the sort of domains that that we use for data. So we have some articles here in Sweden. We have something called DIVA, which actually collects all the student dissertations that are being written at Swedish universities, which is a great resource. If you have written a student dissertation in Sweden, your dissertation is in our training data. We also use some books. We do include some programming code for different programming languages. A fair amount of conversational data, like the biggest Swedish discussion forum, which is called Flashback, which is often seen as quite controversial. But we wanted to have that type of language represented in our model because variety is good for these models. We do have some task-related data sets, like some math data, some summarization data, some instruction data, and then, of course, the main part is web data. Various types of web data. So all in all, we actually collected 1.5 terabytes of raw text data for this. And then we do some filtering of the data. So first of all, we do some quality filtering to remove obviously machine-generated text and just spam, which reduces the data size somewhat. And then we do deduplication in several steps to remove identical documents, because that will harm the performance of the model. So we end up with the training data set consists of 1.2 terabytes of text data, which is actually 320 billion tokens. So we actually get the size of training data that we were aiming for. And this is just a breakdown of the different languages. So we of course also weigh the data sources in a little bit arbitrary way, but we wanted to have Swedish as the main language in the model. Then we have English because we have a good variety of data sources. Then Norwegian, Danish, Icelandic, and 7% programming code in the model. So we end up there slightly more than GPT-3, actually. So in the ballpark of models that are big. So we should be able to do this. What we have done is we have trained models of different sizes based on this data, ranging from quite small sizes, like 126 million parameters, all the way up to 40 billion parameters. So we haven't really gotten to GPT-3 size yet, but it turns out we might not need it. So we have stopped at 40 billion parameters. And then you can just look at the amount of compute that is needed. So it's just a function of the hyperparameters that you use for the model. Doesn't say much. I mean, it's a huge number there. But it turns out that if you have an A100 card, which is a powerful GPU, and you run max throughput on that A100 card, it would take you a little bit more than 9 years to train our biggest model. So obviously, we're going to need more than one GPU here, right? And luckily we have that here in Sweden. We have something called Berzelius, which is our biggest and only supercomputer for AI, specifically devoted to AI. It's a donation from the Wallenberg Foundation for AI research. It's located in Linköping, and it's an NVIDIA SuperPod. It actually contains 60 DGX A100 nodes with 40 gigabytes, plus another 34 nodes, which was just added with the 80 gigabyte versions. So this is a sizable infrastructure that we can actually use to train models on this size. We also use then the Megatron software stack from NVIDIA, because that enables us to really do optimized training on the compute nodes, which is needed because otherwise it's going to take a long time. So for our models, we have used 20 nodes on Berzelius, so 160 GPUs, which has reduced training time for the biggest models to a couple of months. So that's doable. And this is a wonderful resource that we have. The models behave as you would expect. This is the training loss or the validation loss, which is what you look at if you see that the model actually trains, it learns during training, and you want the loss to be as low as possible. So what you see here is that when we scale up the model size, it becomes better at language modeling, what we expect. The models are available openly, but under a license currently. We would really like to release the models completely openly so that you can do whatever you want with the models. But we also want to be a little bit hesitant and be cautious about what happens when we release these models. So we have opted organizational-wise for something we call a restricted pre-release, which has been available since January. Which simply is a process where you apply for access, and we will manually grant you access to our Hugging Face repo where all the models are available, and then you can use the models. And it's primarily for validation and research at the moment. But as I said, we really hope to get to a completely open release on this. So what we're doing currently is trying to validate whether these models are actually useful for something. So you need to keep in mind that this is a research project. We're not building a product or a service. We're not competing with ChatGPT here. We're building this as a research project. But we're interested in seeing whether a model like this can actually be useful for something in Swedish society. So we've started this validation project, again, funded by the Swedish Innovation Agency. And we have stakeholders from all sectors of society who want to validate different types of use cases based on this model. And we give them access both to the model weights so that they can build solutions in-house, but we also set up an API solution. So we do that together with one of our partners called CGIT, which they provide a DGX system for us, and we build an API using that DGX system. So looking a little bit ahead into the future, we are up there in the development process. We have shown that it's possible to train large language models even in a very small country like Sweden using a very limited team size like us at RDA Sweden. We've trained on billions of tokens and billions of parameters. But of course, as you know, ChatGPT and GPT-4 has come out. So if we want to compete with this, we need to move further down in this. We need to train on trillions of tokens using hundreds of billions of parameters. And we need to start looking at refinements of the model. So in the case of ChatGPT, for example, they have used both instruction fine-tuning and reinforcement learning, which is, of course, something that we are interested in looking ahead. We're also really interested in multimodality, which is not only training on text, but training on text and images and video and audio, because that might give the model interesting capacities. So this is definitely something we're looking ahead of. But of course, I mean, the field is moving at an incredibly rapid pace, and it's really hard to keep up, but we're really trying to do that. And I think that this is my last picture, so I'm going to stop and maybe take one or two questions.
Thank you, Magnus. That was fascinating. We could go on a bit more, but
oh yeah.
Would anybody like to ask a question? Okay, do you have the mic? There's, oh, look, there are hands waving, all in the same area. We'll take those two questions.
Hi, thank you so much for an interesting talk. I was just wondering if you have any thoughts about reproducibility for the output of these models, because we've seen with ChatGPT, for example, that it's not always consistent.
Yeah.
And of course, reproducibility is something we really care about here.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering if you have any thoughts on that, and also on the possibility of biased data going into the training model and how to deal with, potentially biased outcome. Thank you.
Yeah, I think those are great questions, and I think they are great from our perspective, because if you compare with OpenAI, we don't know anything about the training data, and for GPT-4, we don't know anything about the model either. I mean, they have taken the decision to not even tell us about that now. So in the case of GPT-3, we are completely transparent with the training data that we have used. And that also means that you have full control over how the model was trained and what type of output you get from the model. And when it comes to bias, we have taken the decision to not remove controversial content from the data, because one aspect is we want to have as high variety as possible because it's beneficial for the language modeling objective. We don't want to censor opinions in the data because we don't know which use cases people want to use the model for. So, I mean, one example is I've been working with social scientists who are interested in various ideas on democracy, for example. And in that use case, you really want to have bias in the data. That's what you're interested in. So we are explicitly careful to not filter too much in the data. But I think it's important. I mean, it's a democratization argument, right? We need to be as transparent as possible, and in the best of worlds, being able to share also the training data. That has been problematic for us because we operate in the European Union with a hard legislation around data. So we can't do that, but we would like to do that. But great question.
I think there was one more there. We'll take that other question if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks. This is fascinating. What I'm thinking about is that the text that you use as training data are implicitly weighted over time because it corresponds to the rate at which digital text is available.
Yeah.
And humans, of course, implicitly weight more recent texts that they read more importantly than maybe things that are 100 years old. So is that a problem? Do the models take care of that in one way or another?
Yeah, so I mean, it is a problem, right? Because when GPT-3 was released, that was before COVID, and then COVID happened. And I mean, there are plenty of examples where GPT-3 couldn't ask questions about or answer questions about COVID. But there is a lot of focus in the field on what's called continual learning. So the ability to update models continuously. I mean, one problem is that they are quite compute intensive. So training our 40 billion model, that requires 160 GPUs over 2 months' time. And you can't do that just continuously unless you own 160 GPUs. But there is a lot of research going into this. So I mean, yes, it is a problem. And yes, people are looking into it.
There's one question online, if
Yep.
I may pose it,
Thank you.
from Anu Gururaj, who asks, have you used existing LLMs trained primarily on English text and use domain adaptation to adapt to Swedish language?
No, we have not, because we want to have, it goes back to the question about bias and transparency. We want to have control over the entire process. So we use some English data in our model, and we do that because English data is high quality and plentiful, but we do not start from a pre-existing English model.
Okay. I see a hand. It will take the last question. Okay.
Thank you. It's 3 small questions.
Oh.
Sorry.
That's very
Great.
cheeky.
But I hope they are short. So the first one is how much did it cost? Because
So when we calculate that, we calculate the hardware costs, which is about 5 million Swedish crowns, and then a little bit electricity on top of that, and the man hours. So not too much, actually.
Mhm. The second one is how well does it do in comparison to even the benchmarks that you were creating?
Exactly. So we have started evaluating the model now and running benchmark. And if we only look at language modeling performance, which is sort of the first thing we'd look at, it's the best language model for Swedish, of course. I mean, that's no surprise, but it behaves also in English comparable to other open models of the same size. So that's an indication that it works in the way we expect it to do. But then we really wait for the results of the validation project, because in the end, it's stakeholders' use cases that matter. Mm-hmm. So we don't have that answer yet. What we can say is that we don't expect it to be competitive with GPT-4 because of the limited amount of resources that we have had access to.
Plus, that's a black box.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the final one is, are the data sets also open or not?
So part of the data sets are open. The ones that we have collected, they are open. But the ones that we have scraped, we cannot share because of the legislation in the EU. Mm-hmm. So you need to fill in a data processing risk assessment, and you take full responsibility for any PII in the data, et cetera, et cetera. And that's the reason why we can't share it.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. I think this is an amazing presentation, and I think very much needed by the community, because I've seen many people demanding exactly this.
Oh, great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And with that, so thank you for your 3 questions and your final remark to Magnus. I really am grateful, Magnus, and to Monica for putting us in contact with Magnus. I believe that she's his PR, by the way, agent. So you need to get Magnus to speak, talk to Monica. But thank you, Magnus, for coming and
thank you so much. Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Something going on the screen here. I'll just turn it up. Okay, and here I think it's the next slide that is mine. Oh, I just go with the. Oh, I do. Okay, right. I won't even try to pronounce that. I'll guess, but it means goodbye and thank you. So here we are at the end of, wow, 3 amazing, fun-filled, energetic days. bear with me. There are a few different things we'd like to tell you in this, and they're all quite short, and we hope to finish on time at 4:30. But, you know, this is an amazing event. I've really felt the energy from the meetings. We appreciate your physical and online attendance. It is quite a significant endeavour, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. But of course, none of these things happen without sponsors, without funding, but also without the willingness and efforts of many, many different organisations. And I really would like to thank, first of all, our sponsors, the Australian Research Data Commons, Oracle for Research, Elsevier, the City of Gothenburg, and of course then our hosts, the Swedish National Data Service, Gothenburg University and Chalmers. And again, I know I did it at the beginning, but it is really, you have no idea what these people, what they have given us in terms of time, connections, and their efforts and dedication, and completely volunteer. There's no profit in this for them. There's just visibility, and there is just obviously a really big willingness on their behalf, their organization's behalf, to host an open and collaborative community and activity like ours. So we would like, as I said, to thank them there very much again. Connie has a certificate. I don't know if Sverker I see here, Martin, Maria, I see you there, and Max I don't think could be with us. But while I move on, so I don't take up much time, Connie would like to give you the certificate so you know where each of the 100 trees that we planted, so there'll be a little forest for each of you in some part of the world. That is our small token of gratitude to you for this wonderful endeavour. Thank you. So, of course, you know, we're the digital age. We will have a digital legacy from P20. Both of these contributions are volunteer again. So Natalie Harrower, our video, our press and media officer for the week, who has done some wonderful videos around not just the event, but also for the 10 years. And Paula, who has happy snapped for us for 4 days. And there are hundreds of pictures that we will make available. Paula, thank you. Natalie, thank you very much. And there you are. You'll see some every now and then. I'll show you some of a sample. We had a huge number. So if hybrid works because we have amazing technicians and technical equipment, but also because we had people in the rooms making sure the Zoom meetings were starting, a whole series of volunteers from Chalmers and the Swedish National Data Service have been really fundamental. You'll see my team in a minute, but we're not very big and would not have been able to. So we're very grateful to you. Thank you all so much for helping us with that. There we are, yes. They were very nice. Okay, and oh, it's missing. Oh yes, sorry. So there is a picture missing. I'm sorry. This is my team. Well, it's not actually my team. I have a very short number, a small group of people. Many of them are in kind, but I do need to thank each and every one of them. So I start at the top. Megan Underwood, who's from the US office. Megan manually schedules the breakout sessions. Can I tell you that? So you could rock along, and we need to make sure that you get the time you want, that you're not conflicting with another meeting, that the chairs can be in different places, that the tab liaisons can be there too. Yeah, and that the room sizes are okay. She does that manually, and that's a tiny thing of what our Megan does. I'm afraid she's not. I'm sorry she's not here. I don't know if she's with us online, but she really deserves an amazing thank you, because she is fundamental to the backbone of the program and a lot of the online content for the program. So thank you very much, Megan. I would like, there are many of my other colleagues, so that's Alex, who works up the top there. Does this work? No. Alex, Matty, Najula, Connie, of course, who you know, Bridget, Alejandra, Abby, our intern, and Al. Al is the online magician. He helps us online. But there is one person I'd like her to stand up, Irina. Irina, this is because of you. So people don't know. She's very shy. She won't stand up. But Irina, you deserve the biggest round of applause. Kevin Ashley is her There he is over there. So we have an agreement with Kevin in DCC, our wonderful partner for this event. And also there are many of his staff that have helped as well, whose pictures aren't here. But Kevin, you're really lucky. I know you know that, but Irina is an amazing staff member. So thank you. Okay, right. So you'd like to know a few statistics to then we can move it on. So we had in person, we had almost 500 people. This was yesterday's statistics, but I think it's all right. And online, 230. So we had a 68% participation in line, over 720. It definitely exceeded our expectations. Yes, we had a capacity here of 500, so it's just perfect. This is the geographical breakdown. Of course, it's rather European heavy, but we understand that that is the situation. And then this is the online presence. I'd like to take one moment to explain something about the online. Organizing a hybrid event means organizing 2 events. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, but I think it's important because we have to charge a fee. We charge a fee when you come in person because you can see it. Yeah, there are catering costs and technical things and physical costs we need to cover. These are not profit-making events for anyone who might think that they are. They definitely are not. But the hybrid event costs us, we make no money on that. That's a loss. But it is a policy that the RDA Council brought in. It is something that is a part of our guiding principles, is to be inclusive. And how can we be inclusive if we cut out a whole geographical or possibility for people who don't have the budget or the means to travel? So we will continue with the hybrid events, but it is important that you understand that we must charge a fee because we need to cover the actual costs that we have, and we won't ever. You have no idea the amount of staff effort that goes into those. So I would like to clarify that the online is a significant thing, but I think it's worth it. Yeah, and it's not about the number. It's not about how many people are online. It's about providing that access and being true to what you say you are. So if we are inclusive, I appreciate that the cost may be a barrier, and I would be very grateful to get feedback and ideas on how we can do that to make it more accessible for people who can't afford the fee. But it is what it is. All the recordings will be online through Hoover, and all of them are available then openly, as with all of our meetings. Afterwards, in about 4 weeks' time, you'll have them online linked from the program. Okay. That'll be interesting when we migrate the website, how we're going to do that. Please respond to the survey. I know people don't. You should be getting it into your in-mail boxes any moment soon. It really is important for us to understand what you want to see, what your experience was. We can't make it better if you don't tell us. We do actually write a big report. We do a lot of debriefs on the lessons learned from these. So please let us know in the survey what it is. There was a quiz for those online. And the winner is, let's see, the winner is from Strasbourg. Francois, are you here? But he's a research engineer from Strasbourg. And we said it was a surprise. The quiz was, you had to answer all the questions about where RDA was over the 10 years, et cetera, et cetera. And the prize is that he will get a registration fee covered by RDA, either in person or virtual, whichever of his choice. Can't cover the travel, sorry, to IDW in October. So congratulations, and we'll be in touch with you by email. And there you go, some nice more pictures. Please continue to give us feedback on the strategy. You can continue doing it online. The rainbow wall will come home with us. So please continue online. There are some lovely pictures, aren't they? Again, I said it yesterday, and I really mean it. If you don't, please keep your group pages up to date. I know you hate the website. We all know that. Please, 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 please. Okay. All right. People are always asking for the things. Please also, that was fantastic, wasn't it? They look like they're doing the can there. I like that picture. Those of you who have convened sessions, we are having a webinar. We Tab will give a summary for anybody who was here or openly. It's an open webinar of a snapshot of what happened. If you don't give us this, we can't promote what happened in your group and say what the next steps are. It's at the top of all your collaborative documents. Please, you have a deadline by the end of the month so that we can have them ready for the webinars, which are taking place on the 20th of April in 2 different time zones, okay? And Tab will run that, but they need the time to, how would you say, process the data. Yeah, we don't have a ChatGPT or RDA, so we're going to have to do that manually too. Okay, and then we're coming to the end of it now. So that's it from me, I think, for this little bit. So remember that while this event is over, and this particular significant milestone, and a big piece of our 10-year celebration, we still have another all till the end of November of our events running around the 10 years, to celebrate. We of course have an event in October, which Simon will tell us about in a while, but do go onto the web platform and see them there. Becca, would you like to come up for one moment? Yes, I'll leave it on that. See, there you are.
Thank you. So those of you who have heard from me earlier, you know that I'm not that much into formalities. And I learned this fantastic phrase in South Africa. So all protocols duly observed. You say that in the beginning of an event and then you just get on. And I think possibly you can say it also at the end of an event and then you're just free to go home. But I will say a little bit more. So I would like to thank you all for coming to Gothenburg. Actually, I heard the rumor that there is some sun outside. So we'll see when we get out. I want to thank the audience that are online also for participating. It has been really nice to have you here. And I think the event, the amount of discussions that have been going on has been amazing, really. I would like also to thank the local participants that help out people here in Gothenburg, and Hillary did this already. I thank Paula, I thank Maria, and I thank Martin, but I think there's one person that we should thank especially, and that is Maria Kinger from the Chalmers Library, who has been doing a lot of the tough work of coordinating the local, the things that needs to be coordinated locally. So I would like to give all of them, but especially Maria, a round of applause. So thank you very much. Hope to see you again in 10 years.
Yeah. In the city, the mayor is having us this time. Thank you, Sverker. Thank you so much. Okay, so before we move on to the future, which is, or the next event that we will do together, we, you know, at the beginning, when you were here at the beginning of the plenary, we had some of our founding members. Yes, there was one that was missing, Fran Berman, who was, you know, instrumental in the US. And we had our press and media officer do an interview with her. The full version will be on the website. This is just a little excerpt, but it's about looking, if you like, and her to the future of RDA. So a few moments of the video.
You've mentioned things that are really hot on the agenda of policymakers and researchers globally right now in the work that you're doing. And I think you're uniquely positioned to take a look at RDA as we're going into the future and the kind of contemporary research and technology landscape, because it seems that those two things are, it's very crucial that we get things right in terms of the way that technology develops. So, you know, where do you think RDA can maybe best help out in this new landscape? Like, there's growing concerns around cybersecurity, right? There's the rise of AI. I mean, AI is a term that we hear all over. We had a talk, I believe, earlier today about that. But at the same time, there's a need for ethical, people-centered AI, right? And the growth of technologies and the human infrastructure that supports and builds those technologies has always been key, but I think those questions are becoming even more pertinent, and that's reflected in what you said. So how do you see the potential for RDA contributing to this going forward? Are there contemporary challenges that that still have data sharing at their core? You know, I guess what I'm looking is have things shifted? Have they shifted really in the research landscape in the last 10 years in ways that RTA can contribute, or is it sort of the same sort of work being done on different topics? I'll stop.
I'll give you a Zen answer to the question.
Okay.
I think RDA still has great potential to solve the same really hard problem that we've always wanted to solve, which is how do we build and create technology that becomes really useful to people? And but we're in a different landscape. So in a way, we're asking the same question in a landscape where AI has just unbelievably grown in terms of capability and functionality and prevalence in the last 10 years. We're doing much more sophisticated things with data than we used to. We're much more cloud-based than we used to. If you look at all manner of devices, you know, are we going to be living in the metaverse 10 years from now? Who knows? But if you look at the kinds of technologies that we're using, they've all grown up in the last 10 years, but we're still trying to make the best of them. And what does that mean for the RDA community? We might be looking a lot more during the next decade for things like transparency and provenance. I was just talking to some students in my classes today about deep fakes. And in some sense, what's the original, and do you know how it's been monkeyed with?
Yeah.
And, you know, if you knew that, you would know whether you should trust it, whether you thought it might be ethical, you know, all those kinds of things. There are things we don't know about our data still, a tremendous number of things we don't know. It's becoming more and more important to know about it. And there are very, very powerful technologies that we can't ignore and we must learn to master. And so, you know, like a lot of different professions and sectors, we want to be able to use AI as a co-pilot. We're sunk if we're using AI as the pilot. But we want to be able to use these tremendous technologies as our co-pilot. And so the RDA community is a really important community because this is a community of people who understand technology complexity well and who actually have a really good feel for the world in which we embed that technology. And so I could see RDA being even more useful in the next decade than it has been in the last decade. And it's been amazing. Yeah. So I do think that RDA has a lot of really, really, really hard problems to tackle, but they're problems that are really important that we address.
Yeah, I mean, I have so many follow-up questions I could ask you, but you've kind of rounded it off by ending on the topic of community, which is really, I think, one of the key strengths of RDA. You can have lots of different focuses in terms of research, but really it's the people that are at the heart of it. And that's what's really super strong. You know, 250 people joined the first plenary, and now we have over 13,000 members. So that's pretty impressive. Look, I think we have to wrap it up because we're in a closing plenary session right here, and people are keen to see what the next steps are. So I just want to thank you so much, Fran, for your time and your insights. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today.
Well, I'm so happy for all of you who actually were able to go to the conference, and I'm always thinking about RDA, and I wish everyone the very best of success.
Thanks. Bye for now.
Bye.
Okay. So a nice way to end, and now to look to the future. So I would ask Simon Hudson, who's the Executive Director of CODATA, to come up and talk on behalf of the IDW organizers and tell people what's happening next, Simon. Oh, mind the steps.
Thanks very much, Hilary. Wow, this mic is amazing. I didn't switch it on or anything. So thank you to the organizers. That was all, the keynote was excellent. The celebration of the event was fantastic. So that's a very hard thing to follow. This is the moment at the end of an event where I think people are tired. They're celebrating what's just happened. And I hope that in a small way, I can just give you a glimpse of what the next event will be and capture that enthusiasm for the next event in 6 months time, roughly speaking, 7 months time, where we will host you in Salzburg for International Data Week, a festival of data. So 23rd to 26th of October, please mark it in your diaries. The reason, no, it's the other way.
Yeah.
All right. I've got to go here. It's not coming up
No,
there,
it's
is it?
no.
Yeah, okay. So the reason I've been asked to give this introduction to the next event, to International Data Week, is that it's co-organized by RDA, of course, but also by 2 other global international data organizations. In the keynotes this morning, you heard about the International Science Council, and the 2 co-organizers are data organizations that were established considerably more than 10 years ago by the International Science Council, and they are CODATA and the World Data System. There are people from CODATA here, from CODATA task groups, from the Secretariat, and there are representatives of the World Data System here as well. The local hosts, Paris Lodron University in Salzburg and Salzburg Congress. So it brings together the conference that CODATA and WDS organize, SciDataCon, and RDA. And we like to think that in a complementary way. You get all the goodness of RDA, but with added SciDataCon. And I think they're complementary because there's the working group meetings, the interest group meetings for RDA, and then intermingled with that, all the way through the program, are a different type of session from SciDataCon. If you remember 2016 in Denver, 2018 in Gaborone, and the largely but not entirely online event in Seoul last year. Those are our previous editions. So as I say, it brings together an even larger, more diverse part of the global data community, and importantly, those connections through CODATA and WDS to the International Science Council and International Science Council, international scientific unions. We'll have all the things, as I say, that that's great about an RDA plenary with added SciDataCon. Even before the pandemic, the local hosts added the subtitle of Festival of Data. And I think that's even more timely and appropriate. It's been great to get people here, I think, at the first major face-to-face meeting. But we hope that we can continue that celebration of being able to meet in person and online in Salzburg. The 4 themes we wanted to mention, as well as a Festival of Data, for the plenary sessions are a Festival of Data celebrating inclusivity in community. The local hosts are very big on GIS and place-based analysis. So we're giving significant place in the conference themed to that topic. Everything has a place, the one as a spatial data infrastructure. Themes that have been present here a great deal this week already, AI and ethics. And then finally, ongoing issues which are important for all the organizations represented, which are data for global challenges and decision making. So for the SciDataCon component, the call for sessions, presentations, and posters is already out, and the deadline is 15th of May. Please mark that date. And the URL for that site to submit those proposals is there. And so please remember, it's a combined conference. It's got these 2 tracks, but if you're an RDA working group or interest group, you go through the RDA site. If you're interested in contributing to the SciDataCon part of the program, you go through that site, but there'll be a joint registration. This sometimes gets very complicated for people, but please remember those two aspects. I want to say very quickly about SciDataCon and how it's complementary to RDA. If you're an individual researcher or data scientist or data steward, and you have an idea, you want to present a paper about your research or about your practice, there is a space for you there at SciDataCon. You don't have to organize a whole session. You can present, you can propose that paper, and if it's selected, the program committee will find a space for it. But you can also organize a session. Perhaps you have colleagues around the world who are interested in a particular topic or theme, who are doing research on a given topic, or practice papers, or want to talk about your practice and your infrastructure, the work that you do on metadata, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a space there without necessarily being part of a working group or an interest group. The 7 overarching themes are listed there on the slide. I'm not going to go through those, but we do have a diversity of session types. You can talk about your research or your practice, you can propose a panel, you can propose a workshop, et cetera, and you can do that through the interface there. And then finally, we all know here what an RDA plenary is, so I'm spending less time on that, but these are the key dates for the RDA side of things through the RDA website. So the call will be released on the 1st of April. The deadline is the 9th of June. So for the sessions, a slightly different deadline, and the program will be published at the end of July. The draft program. And a final program by the 1st of September.
Because they all ask for changes, you know. Can I just have that session there, please?
So I think that's all the information that I needed to communicate.
Yeah.
Please come along to Salzburg in October and help us celebrate, again, an opportunity to be together in that broader context of International Data Week. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Simon. Yep. Thank you. Yes, and of course, after that, we go back to the 2025. You know, we're going to Brisbane, don't you? And we already know that. We've agreed that in September, hosted by our wonderful Australian Research Data Commons. So, okay, so as you saw, we're next week, because there's no such thing as a rest in RDA. We will open the call for the sessions, okay, while you're still thinking about your next steps, so you can come to us in Salzburg. And by the way, we often see that people complement each other by, you know, actually having a paper at the SciDataCon part as well in the track, and then follow it up with the thing. So it is really complementary. Please take advantage. It's 4 days. This is 3, it's 4 days. Okay, so the very last thing I would like to do is I would like to invite my colleague, Ariasmi, who's from the RDA. He's the director of the European legal entity for the Research Data Alliance. And I know that in some of the sessions they have been telling you a little bit about the opportunity, but because it's an opportunity globally, I asked Ari to spend a couple of short minutes on, because we're running over time, on the opportunities that the European office can offer to the groups, and therefore support you in your work. I think we need to go on.
Okay. And
there it is.
Yeah. So, especially for online people who have not seen this, but if you are inside, you have probably seen people with these kind of tiger stripes. And I've been trying to advertise people with little pins and so on about our with our picture of our mascot, the Professor Pounds there. And the idea about the Professor Pounds is advertising is support services for working groups. And this is an European Union funded project, but it is for any RDA working group, which has some connection to the Europe. So I don't think this is a problem for this room here. So we will open a call on these support services very shortly. And so please pay attention to the RDA website, and we will also, of course, advertise these on the newsletter. So these you need to apply from the working groups to get these support services. And as a very last note, because the whole room is, as we saw, here's a huge portion of the people are from the European parts of the RDA. The RDA Europe Association will also try to collaborate with all the national nodes and trying to get them also more aware of their activities in different countries. So if you are a member of your national network, please be also aware of the fact that we in the RDA Europe are also trying to help you with your tasks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ari. Thanks a lot. So yeah, I mean, I think it's really important because we don't, you know, the Secretariat is really small staff. Yeah, we're really small. So this is really good because, you know, extra communication for your work, a possibility to engage and things like that. It's hard to describe, but a really great opportunity. So, you know, over to you now to take it up. Okay, that's it. We're finished. Thank you all so much for coming. Those of you online, to all the online people. And it's been a real pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your time in Gothenburg. I know there are meetings tomorrow and the co-located events. To those who organize them and are going to them, thank you very much. And see you in Salzburg. Auf Wiedersehen.